Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Lewellen. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated websites, services, information resources and activities for the global medcoms community, by which I mean people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and so on. And indeed, importantly, for people who are interested in knowing more about medcoms and maybe starting a career in medcoms. So these webinars are great. We can get people together talking about various topics. We've done a lot of them. If you go to Network Pharma TV, you'll now find hundreds of videos, many of which have come from webinars like this. Today, I'm really very interested in what we're doing today. We've got an extended webinar. If you're watching this, there should be 3 panel sessions. You'll find them linked together on the videos. But basically, we're going to start with some individuals, the voice of the individuals within medcoms. We're talking about how to succeed in medcoms despite what life throws at you. We're going to talk to the individuals. We've got some professionals coming. We've got some HR people from the companies coming later on. As I say, the videos will be linked in the blurb if you want to bounce around and have a look. Absolutely delighted to have you guys. It's interesting times. We're at the end of December, beginning of December, aren't we? 2021 is getting very interesting with COVID, but you know, COVID has just highlighted lots of stuff that goes on in people's lives. Some of which is new, some of which has been there for a long time. Maybe we don't talk enough about it. So I'm hoping these discussions will just help people think a little bit about what we're doing, how people are getting on, how we support each other, and so on. So on that note, I'm going to sit back slightly and let Stephen introduce this panel. Thanks, Stephen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. My name's Steve Walker from St. Giles Medical, based in London and in Berlin. To those of you who got a mince pie, enjoy. To those of you who didn't, I'm so sorry. I'm joined by my colleague, Katja, who we're going to jointly chair this. Katja, would you like to say a few words?
I would do. From my point of view, in terms of introducing myself, I've had a split career. So the first part of my career was in medical communications and publishing. I'm now a performance coach and I do job applications and interview. And for me, actually helping people to succeed wherever they are in their jobs is a really important factor for me. So I kind of jumped at the chance to be part of this webinar because I think particularly since the year that we've had, or the couple of years that we've had, actually the more and more challenges that affect people. I'm particularly interested in mid and late career, supporting people in that area because there are so many more challenges for them, particularly 40 to 60-year-olds. And, you know, in terms of life throwing things at us, one of the things it throws us at some of us is the menopause. And so that's why I've chosen to talk about that as part of my session today. And I think that's something that's really important in terms of when we're thinking about our working life and succeeding in our working life. So certainly afterwards, if anybody wants to have a chat to me about that, I'd be more than happy to share the little that I do know. But I've also I'm very happy to be joining this panel.
Katja, thank you very much indeed. So we all wear a mask and we all have a professional mask. We turn up at work, we look smart, we try and do our job. But it's not really until you sort of get to know someone and you start to talk to them, do you realize all the difficulties they have behind that mask. It could be health-wise, it could be with family, situations at home, it could be financial, all sorts of things. And these are things that may prevent you doing your job well, and they may also prevent you succeeding in your job. So today what we've done is we're going to concentrate on 4 speakers and 2 people who've shared various things offline. We're going to talk, we're going to tell their story. And I'm very grateful to all of you. So Katja, you're going to talk a little bit about what your problems that you've experienced. Lisa Marie, very grateful for you coming on. It's a very topical problem that you're going to tell us about. Mark, it's great to see you again, and again for being so courageous and honest to come and tell us about the issues that you face. And David, we've known each other for many years, and though your problem is well managed, it's good to hear about how you cope with things. And then as I said, 2 people have shared problems that they have with us. One, he's not going to talk because he's too shy and he's sitting opposite me. And the other person because she has when I read the piece that she wrote for me, I was really heartbroken, actually, and I'm not surprised that she doesn't want to speak online. But we're very grateful for you all being with us today. We want people in the audience to reach out with questions and comments. And then this will, at the end of this first session, we'll then talk to the professionals. We have some comments from an HR consultant who couldn't join us today, but has given some written comments. We have Jacques, who is a public health, an occupational health physician, who's going to, and author and ethicist, who's going to talk about some issues. And hopefully Christina is going to join us from her practice in West London. So a very, very interesting session, but we'd like you to really interact with questions, thoughts, comments, your own experiences. Anything else, Katja, that you'd like to say at this stage?
No, said it perfectly.
Lisa Marie, can I put you on the spot? And
of course.
Very, very topical. You look the picture of health sitting in front of us. With your Christmas decorations in the background. But we'll probably guess what the problem is when you start coughing, but
yeah.
What's been happening to you?
Hello, my name's Lisa Marie McLean and I work for Ashfield MedComms, very new to the MedComms industry, previously hospitality and events. I'm in week 60 right now. I caught COVID back in October 2020. Started with just feeling a little bit flu-like, achy, struggling with everything. And within 3 to 4 hours, a genuine fear that I was going to die. It happened so fast. My life completely changed in every single way, shape and form. I was one of the lucky ones, still. Sometimes it's hard to say that because I don't really believe it, but I'm one of the lucky ones because I am still here. I was never ventilated, but I've had every single possible ailment that long COVID can throw up. I started with the rashes, not being able to breathe, my skin feeling like it was too tight on my body to cope with. One of the main things that I'm told by my doctor that she remembers me saying, because I have very little memory of the first 3 months, was that I felt like my skin was just too tight. I was like trying to pull my skin away from my chest because I just couldn't hack how tight everything felt. The pain of my entire body, my hair hurt, my fingernails hurt, I couldn't have rings on, I couldn't be touched. Everything was just terrifying. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody could explain to me apologies, nobody could explain to me what was happening, why it was happening, what was going to happen next, why the painkillers weren't working, why I was constantly being rushed into hospital, why I felt like I was on fire yet my temperature was normal, why my body was physically inflamed. You can still see some swelling around here, yet when I have blood test results come back, there are no inflammations showing in my blood. I have pain that I cannot describe or explain, and it took probably sort of 40-50 weeks for me to just stop trying to find what was wrong, stop trying to find something, oh it's this, it's not that, and accept it's long COVID. Nothing is going to fix this quickly. I'm on currently 22 tablets a day. I have been on 36 tablets a day just to function, to keep awake, to fall asleep, to numb this pain, to help everything. It's been the hardest 60 weeks of my life. My blood oxygen at times has reached 77. Luckily that was whilst in hospital because that was an absolutely terrifying moment. My resting heartbeat currently right now is at, I'm a bit nervous, so it's 141, but my resting heart rate is a minimum of 121. Diagnosed as tachycardic, sinus tachycardic, then back to tachycardic. I'm under cardiologist at present who's trying to look into it, and I'm due results of a 24-hour ECG tomorrow. I'm finding I'm clumsy. I can't remember anything. You should see how many notes I've got in front of me so I don't forget very, very key points. Memory is underlined and circled about 17 times because I just can't remember anything. It's just been horrific. And the support I've had from work, I know you're going to go into that slightly shortly, the support I've had from friends, family and the NHS has been unbelievable. I have been the luckiest person I know with this illness by just seeing what other people are going through. It took from the end of November, when my doctor diagnosed me as having long COVID whilst I was crying in the bath, to the 18th of March, so 3 months to get to the long COVID support post-COVID group. And then my journey began with them. Within 2 weeks, I'd seen a long COVID specialist, respiratory physicist, fatigue management. I have access to a Living With app that helps me daily with how to cope with mental issues, how to cope with the fact that I can't stop crying today, how to cope with the big taboo subject of depression, why I am depressed. I didn't want to take antidepressants, but did in the end, and the difference has been amazing, and I'm so glad I did take that step, that very hard step, to help me get better. And I'm just in the most incredible care with our NHS as possible. Surprisingly to all of you, I bet this will be, I am 1 week into being diagnosed with COVID again last week. Sorry. On the 6th of December, I had a positive COVID, again, a positive result, which just sent sheer terror through my entire body. I never thought I could ever get this again. And for the first time today, I can taste. For the first time today, I don't want to cry. And I just feel if I hadn't have been vaccinated the first time round, so if I hadn't been vaccinated, this would be a different kettle of fish. If I hadn't been vaccinated at the start of all this, I don't feel I would have had half the ailments I've had now. I've wobbled on for so much now, I'm going to stop. But I would say that I am as much of a long COVID specialist as you can be. I'm supporting quite a few people on many long COVID support groups, and I feel I got this illness to be able to help people going forward.
Lisa Marie, that is a horrendous story, and you've probably seen some of the comments appearing in the chat box, and that's very, very honest of you to tell us about all these things. I mean, just thinking about work, so you haven't long been with Ashfield.
No.
What normally is your role? What would you normally be doing today?
So my role is, I was taken on as an agency assistant, so basically supporting everybody in the Phoenix unit. So it could be things like arranging travel, back in the days when we travelled, to organising lunches, to basically financially supporting on projects, on budgets, and pulling as much information together as I possibly can.
And during the last 60 weeks, have you been able to do any work at all?
Yeah, so I've tried to go back 3 times. I successfully managed it in July. After 9 full months off, day 1 was pretty terrible. Couldn't remember anything. Got myself incredibly worked up and ended up speaking to my doctor and taking the rest of that week to just deal with everything. But I got myself up to the early December. I was back to doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 days, 5 hours a day. Sometimes I'd need a break, sometimes I couldn't do that, but I have found building myself up from 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours, and the next stage will be to get the second day in, so I can aim to do a full week. And work have been incredibly supportive in helping me and allowing me to recover and return slowly.
I mean, it is a credit to Ashfield that they have supported you in this way. And it's also good to hear that you're now in the COVID clinic, long COVID clinic. Is there anything sort of missing on your journey that would have helped?
Genuinely, the only thing I can say would be, in hindsight, which is delightful, is to have had someone to tell me that it's going to get better, to have somebody to tell me in time, you will be able to get to this level, you will be able to get out of bed, you will be able to open an Excel spreadsheet and remember how to do something and format something. Just to have someone to talk to and listen to and vent to, but also knowing there's nothing scarier than financial worry and not being able to do your job properly. I'm almost 40 and I feel like I'm back to square one of my career again because I've lost all this time. It would have been to be told that everything will be okay. You can get through this. There are people out there who are survivors, people who've had long COVID longer than I have and who have had it less than I have. And just knowing that there is support out there, and ask for help. I'm a terrible person for asking. I always want to try my best to do it myself.
Just sort of final question from me at this stage. Practically with Ashfield, how do you do it? Do you speak to them every week and give them an update, or how does it work?
So with myself, from pretty much day one, I got the call that I had been in contact with somebody with COVID at work, and contacted my line manager immediately, went for my test, was in contact. It had to be via text because I could not do anything else or function any other way. And so it was literally by message. And then I got really poorly and my husband was speaking to work and sending emails in on my behalf. Then it came to weekly updates that I wanted to do. And I was so keen to get back to work. My doctors wanted to sign me off longer. And I was like, no, can we just do 2 weeks and review it? So it was initially line manager, HR. I was in contact with our business unit head a lot because I just found everyone so human, if that makes sense. I felt like I'm at the bottom of the rung in the ladder within Ashfield, in my personal opinion, and I felt I was getting support and people really valued me, and it was just fantastic. I feel like if I hadn't have had that, this again could have been a completely different story. So just contacting, email, couple of FaceTimes, which were very difficult in Zoom, but mainly at the start all in writing because I couldn't talk.
Katja, is there anything else that you'd like to ask at this stage, or can I pass the microphone over to you?
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh, wow, just amazing and horrifying at the same time. But I think interesting your comment about the episode of once you got to support groups and then your help of other people, and how much that helped you in terms of almost giving you a bit of control over something you don't have control over. And I suspect that might be a theme actually within all the calls, this idea that, you know, there's lots of things that can happen, but at the minute you just have even just a slight bit of control, it doesn't get rid of it, but it just might take that step where, you know, you actually can manage something in a way that you couldn't before, that you wouldn't have been able to before. Amazing.
It was with me, it was a case of where I was like, right, maybe there is a reason why I got this, so I can help this person to get to this step. And I have been doing that, and it's a purpose and to be feel valued, because I just want everybody to not, if I can help one person not go through what I've gone through, then that's problem solved.
Yeah, and it does seem to me that it's not just, it's not just one place or one person. There's a multi-factored approach. There is no one solution. No. And it's building that picture up bit by bit by bit.
Yeah. And being patient and accepting. That's what I've had to do. I've had to accept this is me now. This won't be me forever. This might be me for the next few weeks. And that was the hardest thing to do. Once I got that nailed, everything slowly fell into the sort of right lines. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Stephen.
Katja, over to you for now. I think you're going to be talking to Mark.
To Mark, yes, Mark. I'll wait till you've cleared. That's lovely. Well, I think Mark, you bring a completely different perspective. You bring a condition that you've been living with. You have autism, and that is the part of the story that would be lovely to hear from your perspectives. It'd be really interesting if you could take a few minutes to talk about maybe some of the challenges you faced working, and particularly how things have changed over time, and particularly with the changes that we've been all forced to make through COVID.
Yes, so I'm Mark. I'm a freelance writer and I'm autistic. As well as being a freelance writer, though, I've worked in the civil service in an office policy job for over 30 years. And aspects of that have been very hard. I've always been okay at what I call doing the proper work, as in written work, computer work, and so on. But as soon as other people become involved, talking to other people, meetings, things like that, it has always been a struggle. And the other thing I've always struggled with is noise, and particularly with hearing voices. Now, the best comparison I can make is if I'm in a room and there's 30 or 40 people talking, if you're at a party or a big event or something. Most people, as I understand it, you can sort of block it out and just focus on the one person that you're listening to. I, for some reason to do with autism, I'm completely unable to do that. If I can hear 30 voices at once, I am trying to understand and follow all 30 conversations. which tends to lead to my brain quickly getting overloaded, becomes almost painful, and I certainly can't function in any meaningful way. And so these problems with the noise and with meetings and interpersonal skills and so on had followed me all my career until about 5 years ago, when, after much prompting from both people at work and people outside of work in my family, I was able to be diagnosed with autism. And by the time the diagnosis came, I was pretty sure that was the case anyway. But it changed everything, because it explained everything. It didn't change who I was, but it meant that there was a reason why I was different. There was a reason why I experienced things in a different way to how I saw that other people experience things. For a long time, it didn't even occur to me that everybody else didn't try and follow 30 conversations at once and then find their head was exploding. But suddenly, I realised, no, I was different. I wasn't better or worse than anybody else. I was just different. My brain was wired a different way. And once I became autistic and sort of joined the autism community, more and more aspects of my life clicked into place. And I found out we're actually well known to be connected to autism and to neurodivergence and so on. So, as I say, work has been difficult because, like many places, my office, the office has always been open plan. And as soon as you get an open plan office with more than 4 or 5 people in it, there's always at least one person with a hugely loud voice that seems to feel the need to speak all day. And that's always difficult. So I've really struggled with noise and things like that. And I've always found meetings incredibly difficult because of the interactions with other people. I find any kind of face-to-face interactions very difficult. I struggle with reading body language, with making eye contact, with understanding tone of voice and things like that, all of which are quite typical for many, but not all autistic people. And then, of course, last March, everything completely changed. And we went overnight from working full-time in the office to working full-time at home, which completely changed my work environment. Now, I never really liked working at home before then, but it quickly became apparent this wasn't just going to be for a week or two, this was going to be long term. So I did what many people had did and went from sitting with the laptop on my lap in the living room to work to actually, no, I need to sort out the spare bedroom and make a proper office for myself. And once I've done that, I've never looked back, because I absolutely love it. And it is all about that element of control that we talked to Lisa and Maria about earlier. I can control my environment here. If I want some soothing music on, I put soothing music on. If I just want quiet, I can have quiet. I haven't got to think, will noise cancelling headphones work or whatever. I'm not going to be interrupted by somebody shouting down the phone across the office and so on. I can set things up exactly as I want them to be. I can take breaks when I need to take breaks and so on. And it's been really empowering. And the last 18 months have probably been the most productive 18 months of my whole working career.
Wow.
Simply because the environment has changed so much. Now, meetings was an interesting one, because I say I struggle with them. And one thing that happened when we all went to working from home was that there seemed to be even more meetings then. They were just all over Teams because people were desperate to stay in touch. And I get that. But I quickly realised I was just not going to be able to keep this up. And I now know that if I do more than about 2.5 to 3 hours of Teams calls in a day, that will wipe me out for the rest of the day.
I was going to ask that actually there's some element of control, taking things offline and not being in a busy group of people, but actually, is it also completely overload, this idea of having to do all your interactions on the computer when you've got sort of faces and voices that don't quite match and you're trying to follow disparate conversations? Does that make it harder in some way?
It can make it harder. There's pluses and minuses to it. I mean, it can be harder. I like it in that you can always tell who's speaking and so on, which wasn't always the case if you had just a voice call with lots of people on it and so on. And I'm very careful as to how many calls I will take. And the people on my team that I work with know that I can't do endless meetings all day, every day, as some people seem to do. They know that if they want to communicate with me, I'm much happier doing sort of instant messaging by text and so on, rather than speaking on the phone. Sometimes you speak on the phone, that's fine, but a lot of our day-to-day business, we just ping messages backwards and forwards on chat functions, which works a lot better for me and so on. And again, it's down to that element of control. And if I have to be in a meeting on Teams, it does at least mean if you get to a long chunk of the meeting that I'm finding difficult, I can go away and look things up myself and so on, or check what's happening.
Yeah.
I haven't. It's not that pressure to sit in a room and look totally engaged the whole time, which I really struggle to do, even if I am interested and engaged. I know that I will sometimes not appear that way, because again, I don't really get body language either in myself or in other people.
And just thinking about the sort of discussions with the employer, have there been discussions? Is this just more informal things where, as you've gone along, you've made agreements with actually, this is easier for me, and that's, making this sort of adjustment is easier for me?
Absolutely, and all my sort of immediate managers, and I've had a few since I got my diagnosis, have been fantastic, and have all thankfully viewed it as a learning opportunity for them to learn about neurodivergence and about autism. And I've been asked to do a number of talks at work about autism to increase awareness, because I think education is key, and that autism is hugely misunderstood, and that people have this sort of stereotypical view of autism as it's a naughty 5-year-old having a tantrum in a supermarket kind of thing, and that's not what it is at all. Autistic children grow up into be autistic adults. About 1 in 100 people are autistic, so we're everywhere, and people want to learn and want to understand, and autism is very often not what they expect. And so once I've explained to my managers, well, this is as it affects me, but if you have another autistic member of staff, they may be very different from me. And they've been very good to accommodate me as far as they can, and recognise too that it brings as many strengths as weaknesses and issues to be addressed.
Yeah. So what are the sorts of changes that, from your point of view, almost that they may have come by accident, but what do you think for the future? What are the things that you think would actually make life much easier for the future?
Well, I think it's helped a lot of people with impairments or disabilities to work from home. It gives us much more control over our environment. We're much more productive. What I am dreading is having all of that thrown away in a rush that we must get back to exactly how things were before, because there are a lot of advantages for this. I know some people are desperate to get back to the office for a whole range of reasons, and that's completely fine, and I fully support them in doing that. But messages that come out that being back at the office is better for everybody, it just isn't true, because it really isn't for some of us. And like many autistic people, I struggle with change. And for 30 years, I've had managers, senior managers, bringing in new schemes, new ways of working, and we're constantly told to embrace change. Change is good. Suddenly, there's been a big change that wasn't brought in by senior managers, but was forced on us all. And now suddenly, no, change wasn't that great. We need to go back to how we were. Well, no, this has brought a lot of positives. Obviously, there's been some huge negatives, as Lisa Marie has experienced and so on. But the positives that some of us have now from being able to control our environment, to be much more productive, I really hope aren't thrown away in a massive drive to get back to things exactly as they were before last March, because things are never going to be like they were before last March. So let's at least try and keep as many of the good bits as we can from how we've changed.
Brilliant. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, it's quite a compelling story.
Absolutely. All I can just say is that, great courage, Mark, for you to open up and tell people about this, and this must help. I didn't know so much about autism, and you bring the whole subject to life. So no particular comments at this stage.
Lovely.
Thank you.
That's great.
So, Mark, we'll let you go for now. Join us later on if you can, or if you have to peel off, by all means. We're very, very grateful for your input, and it's lovely to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Katja, you changed your role now from being the sort of interviewer to being the sort of an interviewee, this whole session really started with you, didn't it? Really, you and Peter talking about issues, and your story is all around menopause. It's something as a guy, okay, even as a sort of medic, I never really sort of thought about it. In MedComms, it's what Peter will probably correct me if I'm wrong. It's sort of 75% women. Sometimes as a guy, I feel a bit in a minority. But thinks about one thinks about. I never thought that menopause was such an issue. So I wonder if I could ask you to tell us your story, please.
Well, I will. And as I said, the reason why I think it's so important to include menopause in this and raise awareness, and part of telling the story and actually saying the word menopause in a professional setting, which kind of gets stuck here quite often, but you have to say it, is because it's so important for, I think, for women and their career progression. And I think, you know, you do see stories and you do see headlines about the number of women who resign from their work, who retire early from their work because of menopause. So it's not necessarily that I'm going to describe all of those situations for me, but I think it's important to raise it and for other women in MedComms to be thinking about menopause as part of their career planning. And I think my journey with menopause, I would best describe it as unaware, uninformed, and unprepared, and which is the worst possible scenario. But unaware in that, completely clueless that menopause was anything other than a bit of hot flushes. You know, they hear the stories of the hot flush, and that, you know, of course, it's a natural transition. It's not a medical condition, and the idea that you just carry on. But actually being in the state of postmenopausal, it lasts for your life. So if there are symptoms or changes that happen because of the lack of these hormones, they potentially are with you for all your life. I think the most obvious, I'm about just over a year, I think, postmenopausal. The most obvious and long lasting have been for me the hot flushes. You think, well, that can't be that bad, but they are quite troubling in terms of a kind of simple symptom that just interferes with your daily life. And for me, increasing menopause for quite a few years now, to the point where I have maybe 4 to 6 a month. So it interferes with their daily activities. But actually, if you look at the whole picture of the sorts of changes and the symptoms that women can have, they can range from anxiety, depression, joint pain, hair loss, memory loss. Some women report they think they have early onset dementia, and it's the menopause, can be quite alarming. Urinary tract infections, osteoporosis, and then things like the change to the weight and your shape. So it can affect all aspects of a woman's life, which interferes with working. I think most shocking for me was the idea that these changes actually start happening probably 7 to 10 years before you actually reach menopause. So you've potentially got this build-up of changes that are happening to you that if you are unaware of, it basically creeps up on you. Some of the changes happen rapidly, weight gain, changing shape, face changes shape. Sounds like vanity, but actually, if in a short period of time, how you look changes, it affects your self-image, self-confidence, all aspects of you. You lose who you are because you change more than you have ever done before. And I think some of the changes really creep up on you to the point where probably it'd be really difficult now to say, you know, my capacity to deal with multiple problems, as you know, is a very important work skill. Has that changed? Am I really able to do that? Is it just age, or is this a symptom of menopause? Very difficult. If you're not aware, it's very difficult to tease out actually what's going on, and it can kind of leave you, it can affect your confidence and means that you don't deal with things as well as you could do. And then uninformed about things like the fact that you're meant to, during this time, look after your future health. So this isn't just immediately dealing with symptoms, this is actually thinking about the future health, like osteoporosis, mental health in the long term, and even the solutions like whether you could take HRT. For many, many years, because I had migraines, I didn't think I could take HRT. And of course, with the menopause, I was getting more migraines. But actually, you can take some forms of HRT with migraines, and I didn't know that. So again, I'm not making changes and perhaps didn't do things that I could have done earlier on that might have changed what I've gone through. And so that sort of takes me to the being unprepared. I think one of the things I was unprepared for was that actually you don't just get menopause. menopause happens when when life's throwing things at us. It doesn't just throw the menopause. In my case, it was the menopause. My story's like menopause, migraines, and mum. So during that same period of time, as my menopause was symptoms and my migraines were getting worse, I then had some health issues with my mum that I had to deal with. And everybody has all these complexities, so it's not unusual. But I think when you don't realize what the pieces of the complexity are, it becomes very difficult to then deal with them. So I was completely oblivious to the menopause side of things. So then you're perhaps not looking for the right sorts of solutions. And I think Lisa Marie made the point about not asking for help. I think the difficulty is when you're oblivious to what's going on, you can't ask for help because you can't ask for something that you don't know about. And so then it makes it very difficult for other people to help you as well. And this is why I wanted to sort of bring in this story today, in amongst all these other stories, and really getting people to think about menopause as part of their career progression and as part of their career planning. Because I actually think it's an element that for most of us, again, it'd be really interesting to hear from the audience whether they were prepared, but it's an element that we are missing. I think most of us are missing from our career planning, and it's not just one year. I kind of had this idea that you've got flushes for a year. It's potentially could be over 10 years, a decade worth of planning, which affects your career. Make decisions if you don't know about them. Even you've got your.
For Guy, this is a really insightful. This is things as I said beforehand, one knows about periods, but menopause is something one does not think about. One of our friends, anticipated old age and disability and built a lift in their house, which was very forward thinking. But to think in your career that this is going to be something that affects you, that is a new insight. I've not heard that.
If I just interrupt you, the problem for women particularly is that for many of them, they've planned around, let's say, those who have families. So there's already an element of their career that they've had to put aside time in terms of getting promotions and getting the better job, in terms of getting the better career. You had to plan that around, and it's very easy to think, get to your 40s, that's all out of the way, the family is growing up. But actually there is this other phase that potentially could start from the 40s, which could then also equally affect career progression. If you're having memory problems and you suddenly can't remember deadlines, it's immediately impacting your work. You might feel that it's just you. You might feel it's age. You might feel that I'm not as good as I was. I'm not as driven as I was. And potentially these are all symptoms of menopause. If we're not ready for them, then we try and battle through without looking at where the real solutions are.
How long was the journey from thinking about something's wrong with me to actually a diagnosis being made and then getting treatment? So supplementary question, getting treatment. Has the treatment, the answer sounds like no, but has the treatment cured the problem, or have your symptoms largely gone away?
I'm very early in the stage now, so I've only within a month I've only been taking HRT for a month. Almost all my flushes have stopped. I don't yet have more migraines. It'll be interesting to see what it does with that. Whether it changes anything else, I think, is a longer journey. And I think just as you kind of don't realize what's changed, I think slowly, if HRT is going to change it back, I think it will take some time. The journey took me 10 years and 7 months. The 7 months was from the point where I watched the Davina McCall documentary and my eyes nearly fell out of my head because I suddenly realized how clueless I'd been. This was back in May. And the 10 years was probably the 10 years I suffered it and had no idea I was suffering it. But it did take a good 7 months for me, to 6 months or 7 months, to pick up the courage, to do the research, to decide what HRT I wanted, and then just go to the doctor and say, these are my symptoms, I want HRT. But that was quite surprising how much I just assumed that I would be given something if I needed it, but actually it's the opposite. As a woman with menopause, you have to do your research, go in and tell the doctor what you want, and that's how you get to the next stage. And it's trial and error. In 3 months' time, I might be saying it doesn't work for me, but at least I've tried it and I've looked to see what the options are.
Gotcha. I'm conscious of the time. I've let this run on a little bit because I've just had a message here from Christina. Crisis, have suicidal patient, unlikely I can join. So let's see how we do there. Final question from me is, has this held you back?
It's difficult to know. And that part of when you're thinking about this, part of it is then starting to run back over 10 years and think, what decisions was I making? It's complicated with other things like caring needs. So other factors are involved. So the difficulty is it's so complicated. What I'm upset at and what I would have liked to have, if I could turn back time, is early on when I was having the migraines, reflux, tiredness, is to have been having those sorts of discussions or those thoughts about whether it could be the menopause, and perhaps doing things earlier, maybe 10 years, we're talking 10 years, a decade, and thinking about whether I would have been a different person sitting here today if I'd been doing something different 10 years ago. So that, I think that's the story, that it's in the sliding doors. It's impossible to go back and say how it could have been a different person. But I think definitely earlier, thinking about this, it's inconceivable that you should be thinking about this in your 30s and 40s. But that is the reality, is that's when we should be thinking about this. And potentially it changes the future trajectory of what we do and the decisions we make as well.
Gotcha. Let's leave that for now. So thank you again for being very open and painting a very good picture of something, as I said, most of the male race certainly do not know about. I'm afraid you're not let off the hook, because it's over to you now, because you are going to talk to my friend David.
To David, yes.
And, about something that may not seem so dramatic, and possibly simply because David has managed it so well. So Kaja, over to you. Exactly,
and I think, David, it's really lovely having you on the panel because you do provide a very different perspective. Somebody who has a lifelong condition, you manage diabetes, but actually somebody who, from our earlier exchanges, you seem very much in control of that you manage it, and you've said earlier that it doesn't affect your work or what you do. So it would be really lovely to hear your experience of managing that condition within the workplace.
Hello, yes, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I've been type 1 diabetic for 55 years. I was diagnosed at the age of 7. I've been in MedComms most of my life now, really, my working life, from observing scientific posters being done in the early days by a company in Macclesfield called PPS, who the person in charge there went on to launch GCC. It's now Ashfield. I worked at Ashfield for a few years myself, and in those days I was on a much milder kind of insulin. I mean, I started off on ox-based insulin, pig-based insulin. It was a 1 injection a day, but I don't think it was giving me very good control of my blood sugars. But it was, in those days, I was just so full of energy that it didn't seem to bother me anyway. But when I was at GCC, on the odd occasion that my blood sugar would get too low for me to realise what was going on, I recall the next day, one or two people would say, if I was working late, as we all know, we have to work late in this business. They say, you were wandering around the corridors last night, Dave, and you looked odd. You didn't seem right. Now they knew I was diabetic, but they weren't so sure as to whether it was my diabetes or I was just acting a bit strangely, really. But it was my low blood sugar, where you just can't get a grip of what you're trying to think about, and you start to concentrate. And the more you concentrate, the more you're putting off eating some food or taking some sugar, and the worse it gets. But in those days, it took a long time. But these days, as I've moved on, I'm on a much more aggressive kind of insulin, man-made insulin, rapid acting stuff, and you've got to be on the ball with it, because it can take you. You can be totally unaware. It'll get you, and if you ignore it for too long, the next thing you find is that you're on the deck. You've hit the floor, and somebody's phoned for an ambulance, and the paramedics are there. I know that not that many years ago, I had an incident where I was working with a colleague of mine. We both were freelancers working in a studio in a big office block, and I was working late. Again, as you know, is often the case with this. And it was maybe 10 o'clock at night, and my wife hadn't heard from me. And in the meantime, I'd collapsed in a locked room. And they had to beat the door down to get the paramedics in, and eventually I came round and they got me back. But this has been few and far between, really. I think it generally tends to hit me and the family more so when I'm relaxed and on holiday. Those kind of situations where, and I have to say that unfortunately for myself and my family, I've found myself in these situations where I've woke up in hospitals in various different countries on holiday. I recall in one case, I collapsed up a volcano on my own, but the people there had been good enough to get my phone off me, check the numbers, get me, make the calls, and I woke up in hospital. But I go into these seizures sometimes when it's very bad, and I just call it fighting for my life. And I end up biting my tongue. And for the next few days afterwards, sometimes I can hardly walk because I've been that tensed up with these seizures. I recall one nurse said to me once, "You were close to God."
Oh, goodness. I mean, that's kind of dramatic.
I know, yeah, and it does make you think. I mean, that thought is appealing in one way, but not in the other. But I also find that sometimes it's as good as the people that are there to help me in the NHS and places around the world who, in similar situations. You know, you find that some people just don't really understand it or get it. It's like when I'm watching a film and somebody's on in the film is a diabetic and they get it all the wrong way around. And I think they need an advisor, because this isn't what happens.
The reality.
And on one occasion, I again, it was in Lanzarote. They on another occasion there, we go there a lot. Somebody was changing a bag of something that was being on a drip to me, and I said, "What's that you're changing?" She said, "I'm giving you some more glucose." And I said, "Well, I don't think I need any," because they always want me to have glucose. They always want me to eat, and you have to sometimes take a step out and say, "No, let me check my blood, my glucose." So she said, "Look, I'm the doctor." And I said, "No, let me check my glucose." And I checked my glucose. It was up at 27 instead of at the norm of about 5. And so she realized, so you do have to, I have to fight in those situations far more than I've ever had to fight in a workplace. In the workplace, all my employers over the years have been very good. But as I say, when I'm focused, I'm more aware of the fact that I've got to make sure I've got my sweets or my digestive biscuits there, or something nice.
Like you had to plan today just for this call.
Yeah, yes.
David, sorry, can I ask you the sort of the advice you'd give to somebody, maybe they've been newly diagnosed or they've got a condition, in terms of the actual workplace? If we think about this in terms of succeeding in a workplace setting, what advice would you give, that talk to the HR if they worry about, I don't want to admit to a weak, having a weakness or an illness?
Yeah.
Would you say that actually really they need to speak to their employers and get that support?
I think they need to obviously make them aware, but again, it's down to the control. And some diabetics that I hear some people talk about, oh, my blood sugars are all over the place. They don't have a grip on it, and I asked them, what is your blood sugar? I was sitting on a train a few years ago, and there was a young girl on the other side of the aisle, and I could see she checked her blood, and I said, is it all right? And she looked at me, with like, who are you? And she said, yes, it's this. And she said, my doctors told me to keep my blood sugar up here. And I've said, well, that seems strange, because that's so far above normal. And I found that GPs and specialists, diabetic specialists, would rather I keep my blood sugar up above normal. And I think it's really just a question that they don't want to feel that there's any responsibility, that they've misadvised me to try and keep my blood sugar on the straight and narrow. It is a little bit like walking along a knife edge, because you could fall either way. But the great thing is with the new technology, and I'm using an Abbott Freestyle Libre, which is very simple to use. You just basically have a thing that I pop on my arm, and I can just check my blood sugar. It's a little bit high at the minute, but I did have a few biscuits before we started. So I need to take a corrective dose now. And it's all about that kind of understanding and how to control it, and getting used to how you're responding to just 2 units or a fig or something. It could be that simple.
Yeah, definitely. Stephen, is that in terms of how we're doing with time and how we're managing this session?
I think we probably need to draw this one to a close, really. But David, as I've known you for a few years now, I didn't realize all this stuff, and credit to you the way you manage all this. So I have no further questions for you at this stage.
Okay.
So
brilliant.
As we sort of approach the hour, we're sort of 10 minutes over. I'm going to share 2 things with you. So my colleague, who is here in the office with me at the moment, young Daniel, who looks after our office. He's our office manager, looks after our finances, and many little jobs that he does, which we couldn't manage without. And he has been plagued his whole life by migraines since the age of 6. It runs in the family. His mum and his grandmother, both of them seem to have grown out of it. He hasn't done that yet. On the St. Giles Medical website, and we have a sort of section where you can read various articles that we've written, and lots of personal stuff, educational stuff. And he's written 2 very interesting little articles about living with migraine, tips for self-management. But he does a great job, but he, as an employer, one needs to be aware of this problem and just live with it. So he may be working away, doing a great job, doing the accounts, helping with tables, figures, God knows what else. And then suddenly he disappears. And that's because he's had a sudden to walk around for a little bit or go home and lie down, and he comes back in a few hours. This is really changed, and it may be that some employers may find here it's perfect. It's central line, you can easily get in the taxi, you can easily get home, you can easily come back to the office quickly. But this has changed his life. You'll see that if you do read his article, you'll see that he gives some advice about, he's found exercise particularly good. That seems to shorten the length of time that he needs to lie down. But this is a young man who's very talented, whose life has been ruined by migraines. I just thought it wasn't a particularly serious disease. I thought the modern tablets could treat it. I thought it was, for some reason or other, a problem that affected girls. Sorry about that. But this is very, very unfair. But hopefully he will, live. He does lots of things. He's got a motorbike license now. His parents don't know about it, but they probably will know about it now. He is an amazing guy, but his life is, he's tried every single treatment there is, including dietary things, acupuncture, you name it, every new that comes out. but this is something that we need to live with. It's, I think, the third most common chronic disease, and he's living with it very, very well. So he's a little bit shy, didn't want to come on, but be kind to people who've got migraines. The final thing I'm going to raise is a problem of ethnic diversity, basically racialism. So we have an associate who is a talented MSc pharmacist. She is an asylum seeker. She's Muslim. She comes from a country in Africa, and we are trying to give her work experience, and we hope we can help her career. But since coming to the UK, many people have helped her, but some people have been mean to her because she wears the appropriate clothing for a Muslim woman, modesty, and you have to get used to the fact that she looks different. She goes off regularly to pray, and you wonder where she's disappeared to, but she's doing great work. And people, I'm particularly horrible to, I thought London was a very diverse place, and that we were used to all these people from different countries and we made them welcome. But her story, she wrote it down for me. It's too awful to actually read out, but we need to think about people from ethnically diverse countries and groups, racial groups, and we need to support them as best we can, really. So what I get from this whole session is the diversity of problems that people have. And it's this business about the mask. We all have this mask on, and it may not just be, as Katja properly said, it may not just be one problem, it may be a whole range of problems. I'm just reading out some of the sort of comments here that are in the chat. It may be that you want to comment on these now, or we can bring it up later on. So Helen mentioned about the problems of menopause and the mood swings and how it's affecting her work, dealing with people and situations. Rhiannon makes a point that menopause is happening at a time when, again, Katja, you mentioned this, when other difficult things are happening in your life. You might have teenage children, elderly parents, and you have to cope with those. That's not easy. Tom makes the comment about autism and the issue about misdiagnosing eating disorders. And there's so many comments, Mark, Lisa, Katja, about you raising very difficult issues and making us aware about it. Also post-pregnancy changes. There are a couple of questions which I'll perhaps leave till the next session. But for now, I think, Peter, I'd like to close this session for now, and then we'll go over to Jacques, and we'll probably spin out that session a little bit longer, if that's okay with you.
If I could just say one thing, I saw in a couple of the comments, there's one comment where somebody was asking me some thoughts, and I probably don't have time to do it now, but Eva, I think that's you. Anybody can just email me if we've got our, or via LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to have a chat to anybody, but I'm not going to, if I start typing comments, I'm not going to be concentrating on everything that's being said here.
So Eva's question, just for everyone, is a practical advice of how to prepare. There's another interesting question. Lisa Marie, you might want to think about this. Tamara's asking about COVID versus other chronic diseases. Are there any unique characteristics of COVID as opposed to other chronic diseases? So if you're able to stay for the second half, we can possibly bring you back on that one. Also, Michael's asking about migraines and the value. This is something again later on for you, Katja, about soya, nutrition, vitamin B, evening primrose oil. Maybe we can come back with that. But Peter, let's close this one down and bring Jacques in and start the second session, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. And thank you guys so much for joining in with this. I think it's just so important, I think, to get some of this stuff talked about and out in the open. And yeah, no, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I hope it's really insightful and useful for people who are watching this. So huge thank you. We'll close this session down. So can I just say huge thank you to you. Just give us all a wave and we'll wish everyone a good day. So thank you very much. Bye.